Here we are. We promised you there's going to be another episode in October, although the last one was like technically September, but here we are again, the Monthly Dragon with Chris Ward.
Yep, we never fail to deliver on. I never
Oh,
fail to deliver.
never.
Hope everyone's okay. Hope everyone's okay. And we have a good session today. Now, Arne, typically we have these sessions, and you are probably sitting there excited. What games are we going to have today? What's going to happen? But I can tell you for the very first time, you know which games are coming because you, Arne, sent me a couple of games. And you know what I thought? Every now and again, when you're traveling in a car, like with friends or something, you're going out somewhere, you've got a group of you going out. In the old days, I was thinking about this. You used to like chat amongst chat with each other, or the radio will be playing. But these days, it's not. It's kind of like someone has Spotify and they're selecting tracks, and there's maybe a bit of car karaoke going on or something. And you're sitting in the back saying, when's it going to be my turn to pick a track? And I thought, Arne, that's probably how you feel every week. You're kind of thinking, or every month or whatever. You're thinking, when am I going to get to pick the
I feel like
games?
this actually every week, although we have a
So,
monthly show. Can you believe it? So,
so I have decided fair's fair, and you can pick the games every 30 months. You get a chance to pick.
okay, so I put this in my calendar already. I'm so excited for the next 30 months
For the
already.
next one. So we look forward to it. So anyway, you've selected a couple of games, and I'm going to go over them. But actually, they're quite appropriate. And well, why don't I get underway with just the first? So we've
Yeah,
got two
to
games.
quickly
One we
mention, I need to quickly mention why did I choose those games? I was just like browsing a little bit and I found those games and I looked at some of the positions. I thought like, oh my goodness, they are exciting, and I just sent them to you and let you decide. And after all, it seems they are exciting, so I'm very
they
happy.
are.
But I
They
didn't
are.
look into them because, of course, I don't want to spoil
You don't want to
anything for
spoil
myself.
everything. No. Well, there's going to be some fair content within them. The first game we're just going to go through until the end game, till it reaches an end game, and the second one will go all the way to the nice end of the game. How's about that?
Oh, that sounds
So,
good.
ready for game number one?
Please.
Ready for Okay, so first things first, we have good old Yugoslav attack kicking us off. And yep, none of the funny Dragadorfy type stuff here. We're straight on with the main line, and we have bishop to c4, 9 bishop to c4, as we had last month. Now, you may or may not remember last month, and hopefully people have seen the video, we did the old to be or not to be B3. You like that title, didn't you, that I
Love
came up with?
it.
There's a bit of Shakespeare going on there, but you
Oh,
might not have the equivalent in German. I'm not
Shakespeare
sure.
would have loved to have something like that. Yeah.
You would have loved. Now, in that particular game, we looked at the move bishop b3, and I explained why it's kind of sneaky because it prevents the kind of Chinese variation. Because if black goes rook b8 and b5, knight a5 to c4, opening up the b file does not have the same impact when white hasn't yet castled.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, in fact, in this particular game, we might return to that concept, but here, white castles and black played rook b8. So, this is the Chinese variation, and white played the move bishop to b3. Now, just in case people were wondering, whoa, 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 black's obviously trying to go b5. Why do I go bishop b3? Why don't I just crack on, say, with h4 immediately?
And I need to ask another question,
Yeah,
which is,
go
of
for it.
course, which you have answered already, but I forgot. So
Yeah.
this is why I have to answer it. Why can we not take the knight on c6 and then the pawn, which is hanging on
You are
a7?
what's called greedy. That's what I would say.
I
So
am.
you could do. So for example, you can let's put it in. Well, my instant reaction will be to say, let's recapture with the B pawn,
Hmm.
and that fulfills two juicy functions. One is we're controlling the knight, the square on d5. This must not be underestimated because later in the game, even if white gets an h4, h5 and blasts open the h file, they have to get around, negotiate this defensive knight on f6 because that defends h7. And the obvious way to do that is to play knight to d5, which of course cannot be done when there's a pawn on c6. And opening up the b file. But I don't think that attack is likely to happen because you're going to have to take the pawn, get back, get to h6, open up the h file. Seems to me the black's attack is going to be a little bit quicker. And to answer your absolute question, okay, this is it. You never prepared this question before. You never asked me this question. But I am thinking we will move our rook. We will move our rook somewhere. And we could even move it to b4 to attack that bishop and then play c5 maybe to kind of trap this bishop on a7. So basically, you don't want to get it stuck.
Mm.
But maybe that may or may not work. I'm not 100% sure about that. But even, dare I say it, if you get away with your bishop and you've won a pawn, you've got quite a long distance to go, white, before they make it to an endgame and can say, yippee, I'm a pawn up in an endgame. And of course, where there are no pawns, there are half open or potentially open files against the white king. So I think, yes, you are quite right. It is a 100% genuine pawn sacrifice.
I
That's
love
basic.
it. Okay, cool, cool, cool. Good
Right.
to know. Good to know.
So, yeah, so that would be the answer to that. Now, after
Yes.
h4, I think black can actually just play, probably the best move actually is to play b5 immediately. You're thinking, what
Hmm.
the? Are you kidding me, man? There's like three white pieces attacking that pawn, and there only seems to be one defending it.
But since we want to sacrifice
Yeah, but
after all.
and I think it's quite risky to take it in actual fact.
Hmm.
For example, well, let's see. If he tries to take it with the bishop, that would probably be the most obvious one. And then we can go knight takes knight, and we're unleashing the bishop against b5. So I don't think he could really get away with doing that. I mean, maybe could he do that? Well, who wants to do a little bit of calculation? Knight, bishop takes pawn, knight takes knight, bishop takes d7. Well, we could even go
Can we do
knight takes
something fancy
f3.
like, yeah, this is, yeah, 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 right?
Yeah, and then you got to take that. We can take back, and I think that deal would have worked out quite nicely for black
Mm-hmm,
because
mm-hmm.
where our pawn is not, there's an open file. Yeah, and we're level on pawn, so that would bishop takes pawn. I don't think can be really done. Now knight takes pawn. Can he do either of those? Well, let's see what happens if he takes, for example, with this knight. Knight d takes. Now we can go knight to e5, attacking the bishop, which really has to retreat somewhere along that same diagonal to e2 f1 because it needs to keep an eye on the bishop, and then queen a5. And I'm thinking this is kind of genuine sacrifice territory. And in actual fact, I remember a game. I saw once. This is incredible. So basically, we're looking at all this pressure along here, and white's all jeepers. I need a little bit of cover for my king over there. So what I'll do is I'll go knight b3 to, try and rebuff that queen. But black says, no, I'm not going to retreat. Have a bit of that, thanks very much. The point being, if the c pawn takes, then queen takes a2 because the knight's pinned. So white
Hmm.
took with here. But after queen a1, check knight b1. Our first tactic of the day. Who can
Oh,
see
is
what
it
happened here?
working? Queen b2 check.
Wow, you'll get that.
Is it?
Well,
I was just asking if it's working. I don't think it's
no,
working. No.
no.
So
I don't
okay,
think so. You've
but
got to give
okay.
up your queen in order to win the
Yeah, yeah,
queen
yeah, yeah.
5
I
moves
have to.
down the road.
I put the order in the wrong direction. So first we take on e4 with our knight,
Excellent.
and the second move would be, I guess, knight d3. Simple as that, or
Well, knight d3, maybe then queen takes d3. And
yeah,
he's got a little escape for his king.
maybe that is not good. That's true. So how do we do this
Other squares are
better?
available.
You think so? So knight
Actually, two look quite reasonable.
c4.
Yes.
That's lovely.
Loving that move. And what's more, so we're threatening queen takes b2 check. And actually, the coolest thing upon all cool things is after queen d4 giving up the queen, we could say, no, I don't want that queen.
Oh, this good old pattern.
And it's not often the dragon bishop gives checkmate itself, does it? That'd be
Hmm.
a little checkmate there. So that, yes, that would be pretty good. So I think if they take back, I think we can safely say after knight d takes b5, there's going to be kind of a lot of counterplay.
Yes, yes, yes,
Um,
yes. I mean,
now,
everybody who plays the dragon would love to have a position like this. I bet. I
absolutely,
bet.
absolutely. Now, one little feature I could add is if I think b5 is the best move here, because if you go knight a5, bishop b3, and then b5, which would transpose, there is the opportunity, and this is super deep, after knight a5 for the bishop to actually go back to e2, which seems a bit bizarre. For a lot of players which say, well, why did I move my bishop there just to go back? But that is some high level analysis I remember doing once on the chess publishing platform, in actual fact. But for now, let's just take my word for it. The b5 is the best move here. Now, if white takes with the other knight, Then after knight a5, we're now still attacking this bishop. And if the bishop comes back to e2, now e5 leaves white in a bit of a pickle regards being able to defend this here.
Ooh.
He can probably get a few pawns for a piece, but I don't think that's good enough, really. We value pieces much more in the opening stroke middle games of chess in general. So I think that's good. So in actual fact, after h4, we just go b5. White played bishop b3, and now we transposed. We're onto the main line here, one of the main lines of the Chinese variation. The other one sees white playing bishop to h6 straight away. I've had this position quite a lot of times, actually.
Yeah, me
Bishop
too.
takes, queen takes, b5. This is at h4, e5. So now we can put pawns on black squares now. Dragon bishop's not there, and then b4. So this is
Ah.
quite a mainline variation. Knight takes bishop, pawn takes, knight takes here, rook takes, and then rook to b6 is kind of a sneaky move. So this is one of the main
Oh.
variations. Now let me just talk about this. So this is the one weakness in the camp, but this bishop is looking to come to e6 next go. The rook can also slide over to a6 to cause a little bit of trouble here. But the main sneaky trick is if white now goes h5 to blast open that, and g5 is really neat. White can say, well, thanks very much, I'll have that pawn. And you say, yes, but now that queen is stuck on h6 there with nowhere to go to. So like white's kind of playing without
Oh
his queen.
my goodness, this is so cool. And if rook d1, then rook f7?
Well, no, rook d1, we can just swap off rooks and then go queen
True.
e7 or
Yeah,
something,
yes, easy, easy,
e7 or
easy
whatever. Yeah.
peasy. Oh,
So,
cool.
so that yeah, queen c e7, and basically we just that queen's just stuck here for the rest of the game. I've actually had this in a real game. In actual fact, I did go on to win.
Must have felt
Um,
good.
it did feel so, but the idea about bishop h6 is just worth noting. That whole little sequence with b5 and b4 and e5 is a good sequence because the whole idea, the whole b5 knight c4 thing won't be as effective because white doesn't actually have to take that knight quite so soon because there'll be no queen and bishop that the knight's attacking, if that makes sense. Yep. So bishop h6, that's one of the reasons why white might try to prioritize bishop to h6. But then in this game that you sent, of course, to me from the European Club Cup, white just cracked on straight away with h4. So we got b5. And so we're back to plan A generally, which is the knight coming to here. Now, it's worth noting there's essentially three ways. We're going to see this in one of the games. I'm sure you vaguely remember playing over this game, even if it hasn't been looked at intricately, where there's going to be pressure against b2 in a minute with the rook. The rook's going to be attacking b2. So the question is, what is white going to do about that when ultimately faced with a half open file and a black rook and a black queen ganging up on that square? So essentially, there's three ways that white can deal with it. One is when the push comes to shove to advance the pawn to b3, which will create weaknesses. One is what happens in the game, the white king trying to do a runner. And the other option is to already take steps to deal with that, which is to go king b1 takes,
Uh,
and then king a1, going all the way over there. So
oof.
it's going to be a case of all hands to the pump with rook b1. White hopes to be hunky-dory safe over there so they can continue with his kingside attack. That does, if so desired, though, give the black the opportunity to play h5 kind of salt as he like and say, well, if you're not letting me through over there quickly on the queen side, I'm not letting you through on the king side. So that's one way of looking at it. Or you can just carry on with stuff. And actually, there's one of these sneaky ideas. It's a long, long way ahead. But if we can envisage such a scenario whereby we are doubling, or dare I say, tripling, well, doubling pieces here and having a third rook, doubling rooks and having a third rook available, we can go rook takes, pawn check, knight takes, queen takes, pawn check, king takes, rook a6 would be checkmating with the rook on b1. Can you visualize that?
I
So
couldn't.
okay, so let me just catapult some pieces. So I'm going to get rid of these red pieces here. We've never done anything like this. Supposing I put a black queen here, a black rook here, and another black rook there. And that white rook is
Ah,
on b1. Do you get that?
now
Look
I
at this.
get
We've
it.
never done
Now
anything like
I
that.
get it.
So we go takes, 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 check, king takes, and rook a6 check. The king
Beautiful.
can't go anywhere. The queen can maybe block on a5, but we'll take that and that'll be. So that's one thing to try and get the major pieces in
Gotcha.
an attacking position. But other than that, you can just play h5 as well, which just holds things up for the time being. In
If,
this game, White said, no, I'm not doing any of that, thanks. I'm just carrying on with my
yeah,
h5. So we get it here. We go knight c4, takes and takes. So here we see white trying to break through on the h file, black trying to break through on the b file.
White
And
has
here,
to take, right? I mean, there's not really many other options, are there?
what's to say that again? Say that again.
Sorry, but white really has to take the knight. There's not too many other options,
No,
right?
that's the whole point.
Yeah.
Remember before we discussed
Yeah,
about
exactly.
then he wouldn't have to. But don't forget that dark square bishop is such a prize, basically.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
generally don't get checkmated.
So this is what we're aiming for. If white would, for whatever reason, not take and make some, like, go with the queen to e1, we can take on e3.
Yeah, we could.
And
There's not even necessarily a hurry because don't forget after queen e1, he's not even threatening bishop h6.
okay,
anymore.
our knight is just too strong there. Good.
Yeah, so we could just do some other thing, but just at the very least,
Okay.
something like knight takes and then even queen b6 or a5, a4. We're not going to get checkmated.
Thank you for answering my foolish amateur questions all the time. I like
It's a
that.
very good question because a lot of people ask that. We know that the knight is very good.
It happened to me a couple of times that they didn't take, and I thought, like, and now?
Key to remember is that dark square bishop is always a good prize. So they did take here, and here's maybe the more interesting thing because we're still in a mainline position here, where white played a slightly different move from the normal one. I mean, typical, for example, is for white to play h takes g6, f takes. So we have to take back this way now. Often people will say, oh, which way should I recapture? From a structural point of view, of course, h takes would make a lot more sense.
Yeah, that's
you don't really want to get checkmated on h8, so you take back this way, and then after this we could have something queen b6. This is what I'm talking about now. There's no king running, it would have to be b3. So for example, we could get something like this, even trading here. And a typical useful defensive move is rook to f7 now, which is available if white plays h takes g quite so soon. So we're kind of shoring things up here on the king side. Why was that necessary? Because probably white was looking to go knight d5 now, as I mentioned before, to eliminate that key defender. So after rook f7, that means knight d5. Of course, we could always just take it now. And we are defending laterally on h7.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. So, but in this particular game, white played the move knight de2, which is a relative rarity. And the question is, why has he played that? Well, there's two reasons. First and foremost, you'd imagine it leaves the bishop out, not because they're eyeing up the greedy Arne approach of bishop takes a7. Well, they might have been, for all I know, but probably because it cuts out queen b6, because the queen, of course, would be on prise on b6, and also possibly a future maneuver like that, or even the bishop going to d4 or what have you.
Okay.
So that knight d2, so it's slightly different this move that was played here. The line where we put the rook on f7 is kind of in the balance, both sides attacking, both sides defending. But here, so this is it. So we're kind of, now we're black played queen a5. I think that looks like a fairly natural move, queen to a5. Why is that a good move? Well, A, we can maybe spring onto here. B, we're eyeing up these points. And C, we're just clearing the path for the other rook to come into the game. So that seems reasonable. And white has played bishop to h6. So here we go. This time black throws this as a kind of a queen to b4, comes in as a kind of intermezzo. So, of course, white doesn't have the chance to take on g7 because it's checkmate threatened on b2.
Difficult.
And if we'd have swapped off on h6 first, it wouldn't have been checkmate because the king could come out to d2. So here white felt the need now to move their queen away as opposed to play b3. And this was essentially it. So remember I mentioned before there's three ways that white can deal with b2. They can either tuck their king into a1 to go rook b1. They could go b3 when it gets attacked, or they could create a little hole, an escape route for their king to run to d2. So queen g5, queen takes b2 check, king d2. So now black does trade off and the queen takes. But it's worth noting that let's just pause here for a second, because some people might be thinking, well, come on.
Don't literally pause. Just listen to us, but be pausing here for a second. So for you at home.
You won't be able to hear me if you actually pause.
Yeah, it's difficult.
Like, but if you have actually paused.
So now I paused. What do I do now? What is happening? I don't know.
Exactly. But you can, of course, pause at any stage in the video.
That's the good thing about the video.
It is. Now, the point is that some people might think, well, surely we're a pawn up. and our king, the white king's in the middle of the board. But actually, it's not so straightforward because the white king's on a reasonably safe position on d2 at the moment. It's not easy to get to that king, and we are a pawn up, but it has to be worth pointing out that white has actually got some serious threats here, because white is essentially, and again, I like to do this talking through the moves without necessarily playing them on the board. But I put it to you that white can go rook b1, which would lure the queen over to a3. They could swap off rooks. Then they could go hg, blasting down fg, and then the move knight to d5 would prize away this defensive knight here with no rook on f8 ready to defend on f7, if that makes sense. So there is a serious threat now, essentially, to do with knight d5, but having maybe lured away, well, not necessarily, but lured away with rook b1 and swapping off rooks first. So that is a big threat.
So what to do?
Well, what to do? Great question.
Thank you.
Well, in this game, black played queen b4. I am wondering whether black could just have played a calm move like bishop to c6 here. Probably c6 rather than e6, because then the white knight on e2 could have come to f4 to attack it. So the idea of playing bishop c6 would just mean recovering the d5 square. But the move queen b4 didn't seem too ridiculous at all. We had h takes g, f takes g, and then rook b1 now anyway. Queen a5, swap of rooks here.
The pin is
And
important.
now, of course, the queen on a5 meant that, as was with b4, there's no knight d5 because it's pinned to the king. That was the key thing compared to that original variation I told you about. Does that make some sense?
Very much.
Great, 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 great. So what we have here, white now played knight f4. So actually, what I'm saying to you, essentially, Arne, is congratulations. You actually picked a good game, because this is actually a good quality of moves. Yeah, good quality game of chess. We've got two reasonably rated players playing pretty well. So knight to f4. So what is the threat now? Well, one clear threat is to play knight f. I mean, I know you might be looking at the g6 question.
I did actually, yeah.
Am I running knight takes g6, pawn takes, queen takes, king f8, rook h8? Well, I put it to you, you could indeed be threatening that. And simply the move knight f to d5 is a big threat as well, of course. So indeed, we're looking at this potential sacrifice, and we're looking at this move here just to eliminate that guy to descend down here. So two big threats, which white now dealt with, black now dealt with the move king to f7.
Bye-bye.
So, of course, that reinforces g6. It might say, you know what, it's getting a bit hot here, I'm going to run elsewhere. But I think for the time being, we're just holding firm. And knight to d5. And the other reason why that move was played was that now black has the option to play rook h8. Looks like a bit of a passive move, but it's to protect that h7 pawn.
Whoa.
So this move was played. I think black does miss a little opportunity in a second, but rook h8 was played. Now, a little bit passive, but like I said, possibly now we can just swap off the knights. We don't have to worry about queen takes h7 check. We can get our bishop in on the game. And of course, don't forget, black is still actually a pawn up in this position. That's the key thing to remember. But it did allow white this move here. Knight takes e7.
Oh.
Now we're saying, why is that possible? Because there's going to be a little fork with the queen descending on g7 should we take that knight. So black did not take that knight, but I am wondering, could we have taken it? Now, I challenge you, everybody, to stop. Well, you can listen,
No, stop.
You can pause.
Don't pause.
You can pause, but start back in a few seconds. Stop and listen to this. I want you to see why I'm considering actually we could now have taken that knight. Who can see why we could have taken
Okay,
that knight
I want to calculate this too. We take, there's a check. I think we will just sacrifice the rook. The queen might take the rook. Can we then play d5, and is it strong enough? Looks good to me. So this is my calculation.
Yeah, tell us the move. So
we take the knight.
Yeah.
The queen goes to g7, check. We go to e6 with the king.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the queen will... I mean, probably this is what I didn't calculate, but if the queen would take on h8,
Yeah.
then my move would be d5.
I'm a little bit nervous about that because after, say, pawn takes d5 check, you have opened the e file as well. So presumably
Yeah.
you're going to do knight takes, and then we've got rook e1 check. I'm a
There's a
little bit nervous
huge
about
problem because it doesn't matter if the knight would go to d5 because the
because
queen
it's protected
is
by
on
the queen on
h8.
h8. Yeah, and also once you move that knight, yeah, I mean there's queen g8 checks and all sorts of things as well. So,
Yeah.
but think about, you said it last time round, what is my golden number one? Put that queen, having taken the rook on h8, and ask my golden number one rule.
Checks.
Right. Does black have any checks after queen takes rook on h8?
Oh. Yeah. Yes. It's so far away. It's so far on the other side of the board that you do not
Exactly.
consider it.
I hate to point it out, but there's only 8 possible. You can only move 8 squares
It's
at
far
most.
too much. Can we have chess with 5x5 or something? So queen g5 check, and I think, yeah, it could probably potentially win the rook.
Well, I don't know
or
if we're going to win the rook,
checkmate
but
or
let me show you the
something.
variation I'm thinking about. Here, check, we move our king. Queen takes. So at the moment, there's no checks for white now on h8 because g8 is covered by the knight. We have this check. And now the problem is the king can't go to e2 because queen takes g2 check will win the rook on h1. So let's say for the sake of argument, it goes back to d1. And now we take here, and now we're attacking the rook. We're also attacking the pawn on f3. So I'm thinking now black is the one in the ascendancy. It may well be, it doesn't have to be pieces, perhaps rook e1, queen takes f3, check, king d2. But we will then have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll have 2 pawns for the exchange with quite an attacking, busy looking queen, 2 king side pass pawns, and yeah, maybe a bit of initiative for black. Still in the balance, kind of, but I would prefer black in that position, I think it's fair to say. I'm not sure whether black considered that. In the actual game, black played queen e5 just to bring their queen to a more central square, attacking a few things. The knight dropped back to d5. We had a trade of knights. And now we had a sneaky move c3 check. It's nice to have a pawn on that square, I have to say. It's kind of a thorn. The knight can't take it because queen to d4 check, and that will pick up the knight for nothing. So the king had to move to e3. And now bishop c6. So everything currently is protected. But I would say after queen f4 check, queen takes, knight takes f4. In all fairness, I think in this position here, I think this is a slight advantage for white in the endgame. I know we don't normally discuss endgames. So what are the features that would favour black? Well, there's a bishop for a knight in the endgame, which we know. And in actual fact, we have both got, we spent a lot of time on this last time around, they've both got 3 pawn islands, of course.
Yeah.
But I just think there's the white king's a bit more centralised. These 2 are targets, and the game did actually go on to be a draw, fair enough, maybe, but I think white's probably for preference here with the king coming to d4 and all the rest of it. So in actual fact, this game in the end was it ended in a draw, but it was quite a few more moves later. So I'm thinking what we're going to do here is in actual fact if I could do this, or just
if you can pull this trick off.
I'm going to try and pull this trick. I don't know how to do it. I'm just going to do that, right? And I'm going to draw, right. So are we okay? Is everybody happy at the moment?
Super happy. I know you are at home.
Right, okay. There we go. We're moving on to the next game. How's about that?
I hope
no one got disturbed there. I just did a bit of saving the game.
It's fine.
Because I wanted to keep all that analysis for you guys to read at home in the privacy of your own home and all on the bus.
I hope nobody paused and still is wondering, like, what is happening now?
What's going on here? So we're now on to the next game, and I can tell you that this game, the good news, is going to go all the way to the bitter end. So that last one was quite a theoretical one in the Chinese version. I think Chinese variations quite a good line to play, except remember, you can't do it against BB3 on move 10. Right, good. Let's crack on with the next one. Another Yugoslav attack, and this one was played. Do you want to tell everybody where this game was played?
I don't know.
Oh, it was the hoop. You were the one that selected it. It was
So all I did, just for you at home, if you ever want to do something, and this I
Yeah.
learned from Grandmaster Dorian Rogozenko. In your chess base, you have this little file on the left side. It's called Life. If you click on it, you see every tournament which was just played or where games are played. So I just clicked on a random tournament, took all the games, put them in the opening reference, and put in the moves. And there, those games showed up. And then I saw this and I thought like, oh, okay, let's take a look at how it looks like. And I thought like, oh, wow, that's a crazy position. Maybe this is interesting. And then I sent it to you. That's the whole story. So
Perfect. Well, it looks as though it was played from the Hoogoven Open. That's Dutch? Is that
that is
that
Dutch,
Holland
yes.
somewhere? Yeah. So the Hoogovens Open. I'm not sure if my Dutch pronunciation is okay there. That's the only reason I wanted you to say. Of course, it's back to the pronunciation thing again. And anyway, yeah, we've got another game of chess, and this is a very exciting one. I completely concur. And here we get the normal, again, Yugoslav attack. Those aficionados of the Yugoslav attack should be loving this update. They're thinking none of this G3 stuff or the classicals or even the fiddly stuff around the edges, but the main line. Only this time, white plays G3.
Ooh la la.
One of the main three lines, the other ones being castles and bishop c4, as we know. And this one I always see as a bit of middle ground because it's kind of offensive looking, and at the same time it prevents black from breaking out with d5 because g5 adds a little kind of extra attack.
We have to mention one last thing, that the player, the white player, is almost 200 points stronger rated, 150, let's say, like this 150 points stronger rated than the opponent. So maybe that's the reason why you go like, you know what, I'm going to crush you now, or try to crush you.
Yeah, quite possibly. But of course, rating, it's difficult these days. Some of these low-rated players are well booked up. Of course,
yeah.
they might have been following certain videos, for example.
That could so well be.
Who knows? So, anyway, yes, absolutely right. No easy games in life, I would say these days. Now, bishop to e6. Now, this is it, and I think. I can't remember how many games we've looked at in this particular variation, but I have on numerous occasions commented that the move knight takes e6 in the old days, in the early dragon texts, it just assumed this was a mistake here for white to take this bishop because it just essentially thinks, well, hang on, I'm opening up that line here and I'm giving black control of the d5 square.
Beautiful.
But of course, as usual when this happens, the point is that this is potentially a bit of a weakness where it stands. And also, without the pawn on f7, there's flimsier cover on the king. So I'm not sure flimsier is a word. There's more flimsy. Anyway, that's the English language for you. The fact is there's not as much cover on the king side there because that pawn has been dragged away to e6. In the balance, I would say. Castles, and I can tell you one thing here, which is that black certainly knows their stuff here. The knight came to e5, attacking the pawn on f3.
I normally always go with the queen to a5, and I think this is much stronger. Knight e5, I like it.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is obviously, yeah, well, see, I'm loving that you've had so many games here. The reason that this variation takes place, you put the queen to a5, which is quite an attacking square, but they're choosing to do something about this pawn. And in particular, what happened here is black played queen c8.
Interesting, yeah.
So the idea is this does support a future move knight to c4, but even in the short term, it protects that pawn here on e6. There's one variation which I remember that actually we can get all super theoretical. I'm going to show you a variation which changed in assessment over time, and this went pawn to h4. So we're going to get deep. Knight fd7, unleashing a discovered attack against f3, but of course removing a defender. White playing h5 anyway. Wow, okay. Knight takes f3. I'll have that pawn, thanks very much. And white now playing knight d5, really throwing the cat amongst the pigeons here. The point being, of course, that if that knight is accepted on d5, then queen takes pawn check, king h8, and then hg is going to leave big, 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 big threats on the h file, like rook takes h7 checkmate, I guess. However, it's generally been decided knight takes queen, knight takes pawn check, king f7, knight takes queen. Look at a lot of trades here. Here, king e7, defending that d6 pawn. And in actual fact, we can even get an endgame. This is how deep this goes. Check, bishop f6, check, winning that pawn now on d6. But in actual fact, the endgame assessment here is actually equal, even though white is a pawn up, because the king is so much closer and this bishop can be a bit lousy with the knight able to maneuver to some good squares and the black rook able to get super duper active. So in actual fact, this is no advantage. So that line is not really played by white players anymore.
Interesting.
And in this particular game, white played bishop to h6 here. Trade. So what is the advantage of that is obviously the queen's a little bit nearer, but now there's a few weak dark squares in white's position. And if the black pawns get stuck on like e5 or g5, then there's going to be holes on f4 and this bishop is going to be a little bit lousy. We keep going. Queen c5. Again, the main move here. I'm telling you, black knows his stuff. I'm assuming it's, oh crumbs, I'm assuming it's a he. I didn't mean to say like that. It could be a he or
Don't
a she.
worry, it can happen. I don't know it either, to be honest. So it says Lee, so H.Lee, and that could be a lot. Yeah.
Okay, could be a lot. H4. Now, this next move. Okay, I'm loving this here because the next move would not spring to mind for most players here. And I'm gonna tell you what move it was. I certainly don't think it's the only move available, but I'm going to tell you what it was, and I'm going to see if anybody can figure out why black plays this move. Okay, are you ready for it here, Arne? The move played is king h8. Now you are going to think, what on earth is that move all about?
I just thought,
King
what
h8.
on earth is this move all about?
I mean, first things first. I mean, you'd think, for example,
Oh, I see it.
okay, I'm going to come back to that in a second. So b5, I think, would be a perfectly plausible alternative. Let's not forget, is that even a genuine pawn sacrifice? Quite possibly not, because there's a little f3 pawn where there'll be a spot of overloading, but also there's open files, of course, against the king. So we could get something like b5, h5, b4, I'm thinking, knight a4, and then the queen could come down to f2. And actually, I did some analysis on this. Okay, look at the things I do for you guys here. Is it quite incredible, really? Queen f2, let's check this out. So now h takes g6. So white is kind of like descending down here, but we say, no, no, no. We'll have that bishop. What are you going to do there? And the whole point in this position is, obviously, if the pawn just takes on h7, we can just tuck our king into h8 and it'd be quite safe.
1 second, please.
Yep.
I have to... my cat is attacking the other cat. I have to stop this.
Oh no, cat rescue.
Okay,
Yeah, so
so
we're back here. The cats are no longer fighting. The audience will be very happy about that, I'm sure. Now, here we go. So there's a very sneaky idea behind this, which is if white now plays pawn to g5, looking to remove that knight to deliver the mate, there'll be a little check here. Thank you very much. So that then after king b1, we can take on g6.
Oh my
and the whole point
goodness.
is he was pinned like that. So that's absolutely fine for black. So we could have something like this, rook e1, and I'm thinking then maybe queen takes f3, and potentially we could just, yeah, this was a little line I looked at. Giving up the queen for the cat's okay at the moment. This is the big question.
Yeah, it's all
Queen
good.
takes and pawn takes. So we could have a lovely imbalance of a rook, a knight, and some pawns for a queen. That's one possibility in the event of that. Anyway, I'm going to ask you, king h8. What do you suppose that move was all about?
I tell you, it's a discovery check, and we will win the queen.
Great. So what you're basically saying is if white now played h5, the most obvious idea to blast open the h5, then we can go g5. Lovely jubbly. The idea being queen takes pawn, you've got knight d3 check will win the queen. And that aside, that white queen is looking at a bit of a pickle over there. With knight f7 going to round it up. So king h is kind of a sneaky move, got
Super
to say.
tricky.
It's kind of a sneaky move. But I'm loving this game. So what happens is the queen dropped back to d2 as if to say, I'm not going to get my queen trapped there, but I still got plans to
But
razz
I'm
my h.
coming back.
I'm back. Don't worry. I'm here to save the day, but still these guys are looking like coming down the board at some stage. So we have b5. Fair enough for reasons I mentioned before.
Yeah.
Could advance that pawn further, but still the idea to go knight c4 and open the b file with a rook on b8, blah blah blah, that sort of thing. The next move feels a bit weird to me. I'm not going to lie, it feels a little bit weird to me, and consequently, I decided I was going to give it a dubious my comment here, but rook h f1. I think maybe I'm a bit harsh. Maybe I'm a bit harsh.
Not
Rook h f1.
you.
But I felt really about abandoning the H and G file. Really, that's kind of quitting. That's the way I see it.
Yeah.
So Rook HF1 was played, a bit of a supporter. I mean, presumably White now is dreaming of getting this here, but there's so many problems with that sort of thing. This needs to be defended. I'm not sure that's really going to work. Rook AB8. Why rook a b8? Because once again, as well as this obviously was available free of charge, but now knight c4, we have the chance to get an attack down there. So I think that's all very reasonable stuff. And now if white played h5, I think there would actually be a choice. I think we could just play g5 for the same reasons before. Queen takes g5 and knight d3. Or we could even actually just take that, because the question is, if white takes back, who is really benefiting from the g file being open? You could argue that the black rooks could use it just as much as the white rooks, of course, particularly with the black queen on c5 eyeing the squares f2 and g1. So anyway, white played g5. And now we have, again, there's a possible little split, I think. So we've got to move our knight. And I think, to be fair, the knight moved to the most natural looking square under these circumstances, which is to go knight to h5.
Okay.
Holding up the h-file attack and eyeing up a couple of these squares. So the f4 square in general looks like a nice square, but also there's the chance to come to g3, which, for example, will win the bishop, which is the only piece that's able to take on c4 when the knight comes into c4. And of course, there's the f3 pawn thrown into the mix as well. So I think there's a few things. And black playing pawn to b4. I quite like, it seems black's got a reasonable initiative, but by the same token, I do think that knight fd7 is also playable, because we're still, now that's got the potential to really get a knight on c4 as well. So I think both of those moves are reasonable.
But Chris, I need to ask, what would happen after f4 now?
Well, that is a great question. f4, wow, e. Well, we know for starters we always have knight c4. In fact, that could simply be the answer, because you've probably got that. The whole point is this bishop is not going to be able to take both knights. And you wanted to go f4, did you not? Because you saw that knight over there. But of course, you're attacking this one as well. Yeah. So if, for example, I went here, my argument is going to be that this pawn is going to be a weakie.
Okay.
Am I putting forward a good argument?
I think
maybe,
you do.
maybe not.
You do.
And the point is, this is what happened in the game. That's what I love here. So you knew that that's what was going to happen anyway.
I didn't know that. I forgot this, or I didn't.
You forgot the game. So that's exactly what happened. And I think it had to happen, probably. So we had f4 and knight c4. Yep. We have bishop takes c4. So my point is, for example, where else can the queen go? Well, it can't. Yeah, we're going to take that pawn on f4 if it goes to d3 and all the rest of it. So you play bishop takes c4, b takes c4. And we have the similar sort of situation, namely we're looking to attack that pawn here, but this is potentially a target on f4. So in this position, white played the move knight e2, which I think is a very reasonable move, and I've even drawn some red things on the board here. pointing out that it's protecting the f4 pawn and it's offering up queen c3 check, which kind of like adds a big defender to b2.
Yeah, I think queen d4 to swap the queens wouldn't have been too effective. I would have seen that you get a pawn back on c4, but after all, I mean, black is clearly better after
I
that.
think so. I think
Yeah.
that's a trade which favors
Yep.
favors black. Yeah. So knight e2 was played here, and we're going to get some fun in a minute. And first and foremost here, so for example, there's a number of moves black could have played, but I like, so for example, just trying to double the rooks on the b file looks like a plan. Maybe even if you fancy an endgame queen to b4, I don't think it's anything special, but I like this move here. We're back in town, king back to g8, as if to say, wait, I did my job in the corner there, approaching an endgame. I want to come back in, but main point, of course, is it's kind of prophylactic, if you like, because it's assuming this queen might come to c3 at some stage, which actually, by the way, it does on the next game. So it escapes the potential check. Now, the next move is kind of slightly difficult for me to explain-ish, I think. Now, for me, probably the most logical, well, what would you say if I asked you to give a kind of logical, sensible plan for black in this position here? What might you be thinking of doing, Arne?
Doubling up the rooks would be my idea
But for
because,
me, the most obvious looking move here would be to double up the rooks on the b file, probably. So maybe a move like, I don't know, rook b6 maybe
yep.
feels reasonable. Maybe somewhere else along probably b6 feels right for some reason. Maybe b7, whatever, possibly I don't know. It feels reasonable. Black actually played the move rook bc8 here. So I can only assume, well, one of the reasons behind that was if the white queen moves, maybe black's going to advance that pawn up to c3. We'll see about that in a second. And also, of course, the queen can move elsewhere without having to worry about the c4 pawn. So that's the only side thing. So it's not a bad move, but it's actually quite difficult to explain what it really does, if you see what I mean. And a move like rook b6 would have been more obvious, of
I
course.
even just noticed it while you tried to explain it. It was
Yeah,
difficult.
you sort of thought, hang on, probably in the background. See, I never see. You tell me there's cats over there, but there could actually be like a director over to your left or right. It's kind of going,
There's like 7, 8 people
get
here in the studio. Yeah.
get rid of him. He's not giving us the explanations we need.
What is
Cats,
happening?
where he says, cats, you're on, and don't forget we want English this time round. None of this kind of Maltese or German or cat language. Right. Anyway, here we go. So rook ac8. Queen h3 was played here. That cheeky queen appears to be attacking this pawn
Oh, the
on 6.
weakness.
Yeah. Now here we have a really fun possibility actually that I kind of like here. Black actually chose in this position to drop their knight back to g7. Not a bad move. Not a great square for the knight,
The
but it
dragon
did
knight.
certainly. What did you say?
The
A
dragon
dragon
knight,
knight.
yeah.
Yeah, very good. Very good. But doesn't have the same impact as a dragon bishop, I
True.
don't think. But actually, quite a cheeky move here would have been pawn to c3. You think, Chris, what on earth are you talking about? Why is that possibly a good move? Well, the the idea is, okay, if he takes this pawn here on check with his queen, king here. Now he needs to
Again, the
do
king
something.
to h8. My goodness.
Yeah, we're back there again. We couldn't quite decide. We're back on h8. And after knight takes here, we've got, look at this cheeky move, queen e3 check. The point being, king b1, there's a little, ooh, rook takes c3. Very nice work if you
Oh,
can get it.
lovely.
So if b takes c3, rook b8 check, followed by queen takes c3 checkmate or something like that, if he's not blocked it with his queen. So that would have been an interesting idea. And if he takes it with his queen on the c3, now the problem is if he takes it with the knight, then he loses his f4 pawn. And that brings us back to that same discussion we were having a second ago. Remember, trading the c4 pawn for the f4 pawn. And if he takes it with the b pawn, well, who's better here? Maybe equal issue, I guess, basically, I think, because there's a pawn, white's a pawn up, but obviously the queenside pawns are a bit naff, basically, I think I would say. Instead, we don't get any of that c3 mixer. We have knight g7, just keeping things on the down low. Thank you very much. But keeping c3, well, I'm not sure if it's in the air anymore. Either way, white played c3 here. Why did they do that? To give the king a little bit of luft potentially and give some offering up some defensive possibilities. But as you're going to see, these did not really work out. The rook now said, you know what? Actually, I did like life on the B file, and I'm going to move back to B8. So we've had a bit of king h8 to g8 to h8. We had a bit of rook b8 to c8 back to b8. Of course, we can see what the target is down here on b2. Thank you very much. We're looking to grab that pawn. White says, no, 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 no. Here we go. Well, I'm going to put a bit of lateral defense over there. But there's going to be tactics coming in. Although, again, the next couple of moves are slightly puzzling. So here's a move that I might recommend for black in this position. I quite like the move e5. Why do
Thought
I
of
like
this.
that move? Because now the idea is ultimately we're going to try and leave this guy isolated. I think that would be an idea. So e5 definitely is a possibility here. But black played the move queen c6, probing that pawn on e4. The knight went to g3, and then the queen went back to c5, where it's actually looking to come in here. Now, you could now claim that black was just showing who's boss, because white's probably, arguably, white's best move here is just to go back, knight back to e2, repeating the position, of course, which would have then given black the opportunity, right, shall I take a draw by repetition, or shall I try one of those other moves like e5, as just pointed out? Well, obviously I wasn't pointing out the moves at this particular time, but he could have contemplated a move such as e5. Instead, white played queen h1 here.
Okay.
Not really sure about that move there. And black played rook b6, the move we wanted to see a few moves ago, but things were different then. And actually, the fact the white queen seemed to have put itself on h1, which is surely an inferior square, but the queen is, of course, back in town. That's the whole point. The queen wanted to make itself around to the other side of the knight without the knight having to move, because I suspect white is dreaming of, well, maybe f5, maybe h5, one of those breaks probably. But now we're going to see some things going on. Queen a5, attacking that a2 pawn. a3 defends it. And now rook fb8. And now we're going to see there's some more tactics coming on here. Now, let me show you one tactic. There's a better tactic even than there's two tactics in the end. I'm going to try and, without giving away one of them, I'm going to show you the other one. So, for example, if white now played the move pawn to h5, one possibility would be rook takes b2, rook takes b2, queen takes a3. And the problem is, the only way you can defend that rook will be on the second rank. But if, for example, here, then of course we have queen a1 check. The king has to come up, and then we're going to take that with check. That is one of the tactics available. So we can put it forward here that black is literally threatening rook takes b2. But as you know only too well, there is another even snazzier threat which occurred when white played there, which, by the way, that eliminates rook takes b2, but it opens up. Okay, do you want to pause, everybody? But then don't pause until I finish saying what I'm about to say. Pause until you're happy you found this tactic, and then rejoin us. I don't need to take any time, because if they pause, they're back with us now.
That's right.
Here we go. Queen takes a3. What a neat move. And you could say, yeah, but sure, but this move is only working because that rook is on d2. But that rook needed to go on d2 there in order to defend b2. So this would be a neat checkmate with this pawn covering some pretty useful squares.
Indeed.
So queen takes a3. Loving that move. Thank you very much for bringing this game to our attention. You've got another 2.5 years to come up with an equally good game,
Oh,
Arne,
yeah,
and
it's
then
already in the calendar. I cannot wait. I'm so excited for 2.5 years already.
excellent. Now, what happened here? So, of course, we're now threatening. Well, we're threatening checkmate. We're threatening Queen A1 and Rook takes B2 checkmate. So the king did a bit of a runner. Thanks very much. I'm running away there. Check anyway, and then Rook takes B2. So let's face it, it's not looking very good for White at the moment, who is now 2 pawns down with his pieces very uncoordinated and his king living on borrowed time at the moment. Knight F1 offered some sort of defense protection for the Rook on D2. Rook B1 now threatened,
Oops.
well, simply Rook E1 checkmate. Loving that move. Queen G2 gave the king a little escape route. Rook E1 check. Now, I came up with a really neat move here that Black could have played. I loved it. Black played just fine, okay, and won the game. But I'm going to show you a neat move that I would have
Okay.
loved to have seen. Here's the neat move. Knight F5, saying, thanks very much. My knight is coming in for the decisive duties of delivering checkmate. For example, Rook E1 check, King F3, knight takes H4, winning the queen, blah, blah. And if he says, I'll have that knight, then look at this. Check, King F3, check, King G4, pawn takes pawn.
Oh, how
You know
cute.
When I saw this possibility, I thought it reminds me of the most useless chess book I've ever seen in my entire life. I remember back in the old days when I was on the circuit, I saw this little pamphlet, a little booklet, and it was the book of en passant checkmates. And I thought, you know what? I think in my entire life, in a real game, I've had to give a checkmate with knight and bishop once, and I can tell you, I've never done any en passant checkmates. So I thought, who would write a book on
Yeah,
that?
it's like imagine this like but then I found the checkmate, and this is thanks to the en passant checkmate book, which I
Yeah,
bought back then.
yeah, that's right. So I have to say, I wish I had the copy of that now, actually, ironically. Anyway, King F3 is what happened. So we had Rook E1 check, King F3. We'll have that pawn. Thanks very much. The king's making it over there. Rook B1, piling on the pressure. Rook F3, the queen. It was a slightly more mundane finish to the end of the game, and the pawn went onto here. And actually, in this position here, White decided, that's it. I've had enough. I can't be looking at this game anymore. And you can see why. I mean, this pawn's on prees here. This little pawn looks like it might be turning into it. There's pressure all around. It's just the white pieces on the king's side here are just terrible. Even if White took this pawn, the black king's got F7 to hide. There's nothing going down. And a lovely, lovely, lovely game of chess. That's all I can say on it.
Yes, thank you very much. I mean, we will see each other soon enough again, 2.5 years, where we'll pick another 2 tremendous games from the live database. Easy as that. And then you will either approve or you will go like, that's rubbish. We have to wait for another 2.5 years. I'm sorry, Arnie. Okay, everybody. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Chris. We see each other in November. Until then.
Take care.